Hello guys, welcome back to another video. As always, I am so excited to have you guys here, and I'm excited for today's video. I've been getting a lot of requests to tell you guys a little bit more about my story and my background, my journey, how I got to where I am with my career, how I became a naturopathic doctor, but then also a little bit more about my life and my health struggles. And it's so funny because I spent some time yesterday just writing out all the notes, everything that I wanted to chat about today. And if you've ever just sat down and tried to summarize your life, it's a very interesting experience. Wanted to share a little bit more about my background, my childhood, how I got into naturopathic medicine, how I discovered my career, but also then my own personal journey, my own health journey. You guys know in the past I've struggled with weight and weight management. I've struggled with hormonal health, coming off of birth control, having hypothalamic amenorrhea. I've struggled with my digestion, and then I've also had issues with my mental health and anxiety and depression. So we're gonna chat about all of that today. I may end up making a separate video specifically for my health journey because I feel like there's so much that I could talk about. I won't even have enough time to talk about it all today in enough detail. But with that being said, I am rambling, so let's just get into it. Okay, so I thought that I would just straight up start right at the beginning. I was born in 1996 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, although my parents moved to Toronto when I was a baby, so I truly feel like Toronto is my home. And growing up, I was a very happy, active kid. I was definitely in every sport. My parents put me in every sport imaginable just to see what stuck. I also played piano and trumpet, so I had a very happy and healthy childhood. Definitely developed some beliefs about myself that maybe were rooted a little bit too much in external validation, but all things that later me would work through. I think the first big turning point in my life really happened when I was 15 or 16. I didn't get my period till I was 16, but when I got it, it seemed like I went through puberty overnight. I gained a bunch of weight. I started getting breakouts. My periods were painful. I would get a lot of cramps, and they were just overall not very fun to go through. And at the time, I had really focused in on swimming. That was my main sport, and everything else had fallen aside. I think at that time I was still doing cross country in the fall, but throughout the rest of the year, swimming was really my main sport. And at the time I was training about 7 to 8 times per week for about 2 to 2.5 hours at a time. So I went to my doctor and they put me on oral birth control. I think I went on it specifically for the pain and the cramping and to help my acne. Although it made my mood a lot worse, it made me gain a bunch more weight. And I think around this time was the first time I actually understood what a calorie was, and I started to look at food a different way. Before that, I had never looked at food as bad or good. It was just kind of something that was there, but that was the first time I think I started to view food and calories and associate that with weight gain and weight loss and all of that kind of stuff. So I went on the oral birth control pill at I think about 15 or 16 whenever I got my period, and like I said, I just did not feel very good on it. I ended up gaining even more weight. My acne got worse and my mood got significantly worse. And I wasn't even using it for a very good purpose. I wasn't sexually active at the time, and I was really just using it to manipulate when I would get my period so that I never had to get my period while I was at a big swim meet. So I was only on it for really a few months, and then I came off because at that point my mood and the weight gain was just becoming too much. So overall, just a not good experience. I was really only on it for a few months before I discontinued. And at this same time, like I said, I gained a bunch of weight, and this is when I started to actually become aware of what I was eating. Before this, I had never even thought about it, but my relationship to food definitely had a major shift when I was in that 15, 16 years old. The relationship with food, how I viewed food, all of that dramatically changed. Now, at this time as well, I had decided that I wanted to swim at a Division I school in the States, and I started talking to schools. So I was talking to the University of Arizona, the University of Minnesota, and the University of Michigan. I think I briefly also talked to like Purdue and Florida State University, New Mexico State University as well. I was talking to a bunch of different schools, but when I was 16, I got invited on recruiting trips, and the moment that I stepped off the plane in Tucson, Arizona, I was like, this is where I want to be. I loved it there. I love the heat. I love summer. So Arizona was just the perfect fit for me. So I committed to the University of Arizona for swimming in the fall of 2013 is when I signed my letter. And then I was a freshman in the fall of 2014. 2014, I say that the 4 years that I spent in Tucson, I don't want to say they were the most impactful 4 years of my life, because I actually think the next 4 years and then the 4 years that I'm in now, I'm seeing so much change and so much growth in my life and as a person. But those 4 years were definitely interesting to go through. So I thought maybe we'd break them down year by year, because I feel like so much happened, both with my health, but also my personal growth and my interests and all of that kind of stuff. So let's just start in 2014. I wanted to do nursing, and I was told by the college that I couldn't do nursing and be an athlete, that the placement schedules would conflict with it. So they told me to just do a Bachelor of Science and that I could do a Master's of Nursing after I graduated and then become a nurse. And the main reason that I wanted to become a nurse was I knew that I wanted to work in the healthcare field. I knew that I wanted more one-on-one interaction with patients, and I thought that nursing would maybe be a better option than being a doctor. Also, a huge personal value of mine that I still hold today is stability. And this is one that I have a love-hate relationship with, but I'm always searching for stability in my life, sometimes to my advantage and sometimes to my detriment. But definitely nursing was just a very stable career. You know, you can always find a job as a nurse. It's a steady income. So that was definitely swaying me. And I always say that, especially in my early 20s, I made a lot of decisions based off of what the stable and safe choice was rather than the choice that I wanted to make. But that's okay. Something that we're still working on today. Fall of 2014. I don't really think I realized what I was getting myself into when I committed to swimming in the NCAA and at a Division I school. I definitely was coming out as like a pretty moderate sized fish in a small pond swimming in Ontario and Canada, to then being a tiny, tiny fish in the very big pond that is the NCAA. And I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome. I had very, very low self-esteem, as a lot of 17-year-olds do. But I don't think I was really prepared, neither physically nor mentally. I also showed up to school, and at this point, I was probably the heaviest I've ever been in my life. I was about 35 pounds heavier than I am right now. I had very low self-esteem, very poor body image, and actually being in a swimsuit for 25 hours a week was incredibly difficult on my mental health. On top of that, the training was just a lot more difficult than it was in high school. And yeah, I really lived in fear that whole first year of not making it through. Every practice, I was scared that I was going to get kicked off the team and sent back to Canada. So yeah, it was definitely a tough year. I also started drinking a lot more. So we had dry season. So there were times of the year that we were not allowed to drink. But when it was not dry season, you were only allowed to drink 1 day a week, and that was Saturday night. And I really had not drank in high school. I was just never really exposed to that. So of course, when you are 17 and you're unsupervised and now you have access to a bunch of alcohol, you go too hard. And I definitely partied way too hard. What else happened my freshman year? Definitely struggled academic-wise. I had this huge self-image that I was only good at sports and that I was not an academic person. And I think some of that came from my childhood as well. Just viewing myself as not very smart, not very academically driven or academically capable. But yeah, I struggled with school. I struggled with swimming. Honestly, freshman year was just a very hard year. I think a lot of people really struggle freshman year. You are just put into a new environment and you're expected to adapt so quickly, and it's hard. And what happened to me was I basically hit rock bottom and I tried to adapt to it. So basically what I did was, between my freshman and sophomore year in that summer, I completely changed my diet, whole food, plant-based, completely vegan at the time. I was eating low fat. I just basically was very strict with what I was eating. I would only eat whole foods. I wouldn't eat anything that I didn't cook myself or wasn't prepared by me or I didn't know all the ingredients. And it was just a very unhealthy relationship with my diet. I ended up losing a lot of weight. I lost about 25 pounds, and I would say like not in a healthy way. I did it through a very extreme restrictive diet. And the funny thing enough is that even at my slimmest, my body image was still horrible. So I went into my sophomore year. I was a lot thinner. I was getting a lot of external validation for being thin. Yeah, it was definitely tough. I also just completely stopped drinking because because for me, alcohol meant calories, and that was really, really bad. But I would say the biggest thing to take out of my sophomore year was that my social life struggled. I really didn't have a social life because I couldn't go out and do anything because so many social activities focused around food, and I was just too afraid to do that stuff. I also just didn't have enough energy. I was so consumed by food. I spent so much of my emotional energy worrying about food. I spent so much of my physical energy in the pool and training. And then at the same time, I was also trying to do school, and I just didn't have the bandwidth or the emotional energy to do anything else in my life. So I just spent my weekends basically in bed, binge watching things. And yeah, it was just a very tough time for me. Oddly enough, it was the year that I would say my swimming went the best. I competed at Olympic trials that year, and I made the final in Olympic trials. I also made the final in Pac-12s. But overall, I just had a very low self-esteem, low self-body image, and low self-worth. And basically that led me to my junior year. And at this point, I had been restricting myself for so long. I had been on such a restrictive diet that I started to have binging episodes. And this is something that I look back on with just such not fond memories. But basically, I had just ended up restricting myself for so long, and I wasn't processing my emotions. I just had no self-awareness when it came to my own emotions and my own thoughts or anything. And I started to have binging episodes. And this is when I started to regain a bunch of weight. I was also having a lot of digestive issues as well, especially when you are doing a lot of binging and restricting. It's very, very hard on your digestive system. So I had a lot of gas, bloating, and just altered bowel habits. Yeah, I started to gain weight back, which was very, very hard on my mental health and my body image. I started drinking again, like junior year. I was going way too hard on the alcohol. Overall, I just didn't feel healthy. It was also the worst year when it came to swimming. I ended up getting a concussion pretty early on in my junior year, and I couldn't swim. And if you've ever been an athlete, you know that actually being out of your sport for a while is very, very tough on your mental health. So that was not great. Overall, just not a great year. I was also very scared to go into senior year. I felt like the clock was ticking on my collegiate career. So now going into my last year of university, this was definitely an interesting year. So at this point, I had been stuck in a binge restrictive cycle with my food. I had basically gained back all of the weight that I had lost. I still had a very low self-image. I also don't think I mentioned this yet, but the entire time that I was swimming in college, I had very irregular periods. It was not uncommon for me to skip months and months. And I think a big part of that was that I was just underfueling myself. I was exercising so much. We would have 9 practices a week that were anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 hours. It was just a lot of swimming, a lot of stress on my body, and the weight fluctuations didn't help. The amount of alcohol that I was drinking did not help. Yeah, overall, just not a great time when it came to my health. Now, nearing the end of my senior year, so I stopped swimming in March because that was the end of the swimming season, and then I graduated in May. And I had these few months where I tried to pack in 4 years of the typical college experience in a few months, and it did not go well. I was drinking heavily multiple times a week. My skin was horrible. My anxiety was horrible. Overall, just not a great time in my life. On top of this, I was incredibly scared about what was going to happen after I graduated. And instead of actually thinking about it, I just suppressed all of that. And I actually remember waking up the morning of graduation and just crying to my roommate because I woke up and I had a bunch of breakouts and I wasn't happy with my skin. And overall, I was just upset about graduation. I was upset about leaving. I was so worried that I was one of those girls that had peaked in college. You hear about those athletes that really peak in high school or peak in college and then they don't do anything after. And I was so terrified that that was going to be me. And I knew that I was probably going to have to move back to Canada because my visa was going to expire once I finished school. And I just wasn't ready for that. And I was scared that I would have to move back in with my parents. And I made it through graduation and I spent a few extra weeks in Arizona, and then I packed up all my stuff and I moved back in with my parents. Hello guys, this is Editing Claire. I'm just watching these clips back and I did want to say it seems like I had a really negative experience in college, and I just want to say there were also really, really great memories. There were still a lot of times where I had a ton of fun. There were highlights of my swimming career. I made a lot of great memories, a lot of great friendships, and I think that I just tend to focus on the negative and some of the not so great memories because they have somewhat shaped me into the person that I am today, but just wanted to put that out there. I still had an amazing time, lots of positive memories. But with that being said, let's get back to the video. I felt a lot of shame around moving back in with my parents, but in that summer, I actually had to sit down and figure out what I was gonna do. And while I was in senior year, my dad ended up going back to school for holistic nutrition. And he told me about these people at his school that taught called naturopathic doctors. And when he started to describe their job, I was like, that is what I want to do. I don't want to be a nurse, because at that point I felt like the allopathic medical system was not the right choice for me. I love allopathic medicine. I think it has its time and its place, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And although I actually wasn't treating myself very well in terms of actually taking care of my physical health and my mental health and my spiritual health, I actually was very into health and wellness. I think that at the time, I just did not have the tools and the mental awareness to actually make those changes in my life, which is so interesting. And the next 4 years really set the stage for actually taking care of myself and actually developing a health practice. But at the time, I was very drawn to health and wellness. I just actually didn't know how to do it properly. So I applied for school, and I applied to a few different schools, but my parents really wanted me to go to the school in Toronto. They were like, it's the most affordable, you can live at home. And the idea of living at home after living on my own in Arizona for 4 years made me sick. Like, I did not want to live at home. I felt so much shame around that, and I was so resistant to it. But I was like, you know what? I'll start, and maybe I can move out in a few years. And looking back on it, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I got to live at home. You know, it was tough being away from my parents for 4 years, and actually getting to live at home and be around my family. It was so nice. But that's later on down the line. We're back at basically the summer before I start school, and basically I had left the sport of swimming, and now I was really struggling with my relationship with exercise, because I had basically spent like 8 years working out for 20 to 25 hours a week, working out at a very high intensity. And for me, I could not do a 30-minute workout. Like, that just did not register in my mind as a workout. So I ended up over exercising. I was working out 6 days a week in the gym for at least an hour and a half. Anything less than that just didn't even count as a workout. And I was lifting weights, basically trying to put on muscle mass, because at that time it was 2018. And that was really the rise of like the fitness influencer, the gym people. And it was really all about like growing your glutes, creating that perfect body, and like sculpting your body and stuff like that. So I got into that, and then I started eating a lot healthier, but still struggling with my weight. Definitely still yo-yoing, like up and down on the scale, all of that kind of stuff. I also started tracking my macros. So I literally bought a scale, and I was weighing out all my food. But yeah, that was the summer in between college and naturopathic medical school. And then the fall of naturopathic medical school, I say that it was the academic equivalent to my freshman year of swimming. I was just not prepared for the amount of work that it was going to take. It was a lot more rigorous than my undergrad. It was a lot more schooling than my undergrad, and it definitely knocked me down. There was a point where I was like, I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'm smart enough. You know, I had exams that just went horribly, and I was like, I don't know if this is right for me. I don't think I'm smart enough. A lot of just limiting beliefs, low self-confidence, like all of that kind of stuff. It's a very common theme in my early 20s. But I made it through my first year of naturopathic medical school, and again, like, I just look back at that time, and literally all I did was work out and study. Like I said, I was in the gym 6 days a week, at least an hour and a half at a time. And then I was also doing all of my schooling. I had no social life. At this time, I was maintaining a long distance relationship with my boyfriend, who was still back in Arizona. I was just very unhappy with my life situation. I felt a lot of guilt and shame around living at home, and that really made it hard for me to put myself out there when it came to social life. Overall, just not the greatest time. Second year of school was very similar to that, although in the spring of my second year, the pandemic started, so all of my schooling went online, which did not help my social life or my mental health. I think that was a really tough time for a lot of us. And then on top of that, all the gyms closed. And as someone who had a very unhealthy relationship with exercise, that was not very good for me. I felt a lot of anxiety about the gyms being closed. I was very worried. My coping mechanism for that that was to restrict what I was eating, because I'm like, if I can't control my workouts as much, I can just control what I'm eating. And I would just go for long walks, and I would work out in my basement or in my backyard if I could. And third year ended up being a very, very difficult time for me. I was feeling very unmotivated when it came to school, trying to do school, but it was basically all online, which was very discouraging. I did end up going and moving to Oregon for a few months and doing school online so that I could live with my, at the time, my boyfriend. And yeah, it was just a very not great time. But I remember the turning point. I came back, it was at the very end of third year, and I discovered spirituality, and I had my spiritual awakening. And at this point, I'm about 23 or 24. And I really say that that is the turning point in my life. When I discovered self-development and spirituality, and I discovered my emotions and how to actually process them and how to process my thoughts and my subconscious thoughts and like all of those things, that is when I started to have a lot of change in my life. But first, I had to hit rock bottom. And my rock bottom moment was, I mean, we all say it's one moment, but I think that it was just a time in my life where I just realized I was very unhappy with my life. I didn't like my day-to-day routine. I woke up every morning just dreading my life. I think that up until that time, I had placed a lot of emphasis on what other people told me to do. And I think that that was honestly a huge coping mechanism, because if I just followed everyone else's advice, I wouldn't actually have to take responsibility for anything in my life. Where when you actually start making your own decisions and you start trusting your own intuition, then all of a sudden you have to take responsibility in your life. And that's okay. And it's okay if things don't go the way that they planned. Like, I definitely have made a lot of mistakes, but at least they were my mistakes to make. But yeah, I think I just got to a point where I was like, I have to stop just listening to what everyone else says and actually ask myself what I want. And it's not like I uprooted my whole life, but I started to say, okay, while I'm still in school, I'm going to start building a life that I want to create. I'm going to start managing my emotions. I'm going to start unpacking my thoughts. I'm going to start building habits and routines that actually serve me. I'm going to start building a life that I want to live. And this is when I started to have a lot better relationship with movement. I started to think about movement as a privilege, something that I get to do every day. I saw it as a self-respect and a self-care act. And same thing with food. I saw food as nourishment. It's something that I have the privilege of feeding myself really nutritious food. I have the privilege of taking care of myself. I also started to develop a much stronger sense of self and stopped putting my worth on external things. You know, what I achieve and what I have and what I do, that's not me. I started to actually develop a strong sense of self and a self-image. All of this was kind of going on in third year. And then I entered my fourth year, and our fourth year is very much set up as clinical placement. So you're seeing patients one-on-one. You're really getting a sense of what it's like to be an ND, but you're still being supervised. So I went into fourth year, and around this time, I also started my YouTube channel. I'd always watched YouTube, and I'd always loved YouTube videos. And I was like, I feel like I would love to do that. That looks like so much fun. So I started YouTube, and that was a huge learning curve. Like, I spent hours and hours online learning how to edit videos and all of that kind of stuff. Honestly, the idea of putting myself on the internet was terrifying. It was so scary, but I started doing that. At the same time, I was in the clinic. My relationship with my body and myself was definitely improving. I felt a lot healthier and stronger. My skin was better. Periods were regular. Everything was just going a lot better when it came to my health. And I would say the biggest thing is that I can't even think back to when I lost the weight or when my skin got good or when my periods got good, because I wasn't even focused on that. The getting rid of the symptoms or the things that I didn't like about my health, that all came secondary to creating the routines that I wanted and the life that I wanted to live. So I started seeing myself as a person that worked out every day. I saw myself as a person who ate healthy. I saw myself as a person who meditated and had a spiritual practice. And then everything else followed. I think that we're so often focused on getting rid of the symptoms that we have, but instead we have to think about how the happiest, healthiest version of ourselves would act and then show up as that person every day. But that's just kind of a caveat, because I really can't give you guys a timeline about when my digestion changed and my skin changed and all of that kind of stuff. But I will say I do remember like my digestion significantly improving fourth year. And I think a big part of that was regulating my nervous system and just actually bringing my body into a calm state where my digestive system could operate properly. I will make a full video probably on my digestive health journey, because it definitely was a journey. Editing Claire back again, but one other thing that I wanted to say was over the 4 years that I was in naturopathic medical school, I was taking all of the things that I was learning in school and applying them to my own health. And I was doing a lot of trial and error, like seeing what worked for me, seeing what didn't, all of those things. And I think that we can all agree that we have a lot of access to information when it comes to our health. The hard part is actually figuring out what works for you, doing the trial and error, and investing that energy into actually making the changes in your life. That's something that I'm very, very passionate about. I know that with the amount of access to information we have, and what works for one person is not always going to work for you. And then a big part of it is building the routines, building the habits, all of those kind of things. So just want to put that out there, but as always, back to the video. So anyway, we are in 4th year now. We're coming up to graduation. Again, same emotions that I dealt with 4 years before. At this point, instead of swimming being my identity, school had become my identity. I was a little bit better because I had developed that sense of self, but still very, very scared of graduation. Like I said, stability is a huge pillar of mine. It's something that's very important to me. And the idea of graduating and having that instability was terrifying. At this point, I also ended up ending that relationship that I was in. We had been together for almost 5 years, and that was incredibly terrifying to end that relationship. And he really was my link to college. He was my college boyfriend. You know, it was very, very scary to sever that. So I ended up leaving that relationship shortly before graduation. I had a job offer from the clinic that I work at now, but it was hinged on me completing and passing all of my licensing exams. And I had 3 licensing exams to write. So I took that summer to write all of my licensing exams, and I wrote them all back to back. And looking back, I look back on that summer with such fond memories, which is so interesting because it was really the most unstable time in my life. I had just left a huge relationship. I had just finished 4 years of school, not knowing if I was going to pass all of my exams or what I was going to do after, or what I was going to do if I didn't pass my exams. But really, like, all I had to do that summer was study and edit my YouTube videos. And to be fair, at this time, my social life was still not very good. I still wasn't very good at putting myself out there. I really hadn't made that good of an effort to make friends after leaving school, like leaving Arizona. I really, really struggled to make friends in my early 20s. Like, it was really tough. And I just hadn't put myself out there enough. But all I did that summer was study and edit YouTube videos. And although it was a very unstable time in my life, I do look back at it with really fond memories. And yeah, if you guys want, you can even go back and watch videos from that time, because there's still videos on my channel. So I'll link a few of those in the description box below. But yeah, that was the summer of 2022. In the fall of 2022, I got my results back and I passed all of my exams. That was an incredibly, incredibly stressful time in my life because I had just spent months and months and months with all of my time and my energy studying for those exams. I invested a lot of money writing all of those exams. So to actually pass them was amazing. And I had my start date. I was going to start January 2023, and I was so excited. I ended up going to Europe for a few weeks with my mom to celebrate. It was an amazing time. And that brings us to January of 2023. I finally moved out of my parents' house. I moved into the apartment that I'm in right now, which is just down the street from my work. So I had my dream job. I had my dream apartment. I was ready to just live my life, and somehow I was miserable. This is a great lesson where I learned that even though I had told myself that once I had my job, once I had my license, once I was a naturopathic doctor, once I had my apartment that I wanted, then I would be happy. And then I got all of those things and I wasn't happy. That was a very confusing moment for me. I was like, what the heck? Like, I thought all of this would make me happy. It turns out it wouldn't. Because now I told myself that once I had a really busy practice and once I was busy seeing patients and I was a really successful naturopathic doctor, then I would be happy. When I was living with my parents, I would close my eyes and I would visualize like having my apartment and working downtown and having the life that I had. And then once I got that, like I wasn't happy. And it was very confusing to me. That was a very steep learning curve, but that basically led me into the spring of 2023. So basically in the spring of 2023, I had another another moment where I realized, okay, like my career is not going to make me happy. Like it can be a fulfilling career, but it's not going to be the be all and end all. And again, I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out that I have to create a life that I want. And a big part of that was coming to terms that I was just not a very social person and that I needed to start putting myself out there. That was kind of the journey that I went on in early 2023. I was really focused on cultivating more social relationships and just finding friends. And again, I can make a separate video about making friends in your 20s because especially moving from Arizona back to Toronto, I had really fallen out of touch with all of my high school friends, and making friends in your 20s is just quite difficult. That was early in 2023. I also started dating again for the first time in a year. And if you've ever been on Hinge, you know that that is an emotional roller coaster. So that was a very interesting time as well. But I was just very busy. I was busy trying to build my social life. I was busy trying to get started in practice. It was a very steep learning curve being in private practice. So that was very interesting and fun. Yeah, I just continued to try and build my own sense of self and my own self-worth. But yeah, that really brings me back to the fall of 2023. At that point, I had taken almost a full year off of YouTube. YouTube was just too much for me when I was trying to start practice and I was moving and like everything was going on, and I was like, I just do not have the bandwidth to do YouTube right now. So I started posting back in the fall. Yeah, that's really brought me to where I am now. And we're still in the early chapters. You guys sometimes ask how old I am. I am 27. So I really do feel like I'm still in the very early chapters of my own personal story. Sometimes I feel like 27 feels so old nowadays, but I also recognize that I am very, very young. But yeah, that's kind of my story. I know that I really didn't talk that much about my own personal health journey. I think I'm just gonna make that a separate story, but I wanted to give you guys kind of a background, just tell you a little bit more about myself. I guess that kind of brings us to the present moment of summer 2024. At this point, I feel like I'm in a much better place. Definitely still having my ups and my downs, but as always, I feel like I'm always evolving, right? We're always all evolving. We're always all learning. We're having new experiences, and we're taking those experiences and we're integrating them into our own human experience and our own lives. But I'm sure it's already been a very long video, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. If you guys have any follow-up questions, because I feel like I just had you guys drinking from the fire hose for about 30 minutes, let me know in the comments down below. Really, if you have any follow-up questions, if there's enough of them, I'll even make a follow-up video to this one, but pop your questions or your comments in the comments down below. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.